Well, hello, it's Kim and Jamalyn joining you again for One Thing More.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, Jamalyn. I just know that you just came off of Giving Tuesday, so.
It is. Today's December 1st. Is that right? Oh
Yeah,
my gosh.
I know.
Today's December 1st. Yesterday was Giving Tuesday. And for those of you who don't know what Giving Tuesday is, it's a movement that started, probably around 10 years ago. I remember someone calling me when I was working at St. Luke's and saying, "What are you doing for Giving Tuesday?" And I didn't know what they were talking about. I had to look it up. But it has been a movement that's really taken off. It's always the Tuesday right after Thanksgiving. So it's the nonprofit world's response to Black Friday, kind of. And so it's a day of giving. And so Zami Fondwa, the organization that I founded and helped run, it's our biggest day of the year. So we had a goal to raise $60,000, which would be the equivalent of 2 houses. So we build houses we hire Haitians to build houses for people living in Fondwa, Haiti. And $60,000 would be the equivalent of the cost for 2 houses. And we raised $49,000 yesterday. It was amazing.
Yeah.
So,
and you're not done.
We're not done. And Kim's going to write me a check for $11,000. Right here in front of us on camera.
When I win the lottery,
we'll wait while
which
you
I
get
can't
the checkbook.
play. Oh, by
I
the
know,
way.
yeah. Tell Byron
Yeah.
he can just send the check directly.
I'll talk
So
with him
I
about it.
am a little bit exhausted because I know for people who know me really well, I tend to be extroverted, but since I've had some surgeries over the summer, I don't always have the same energy
Yeah.
level.
We'll get through it together. We're going to talk about the sermon from Sunday, though, which was the beginning of Advent, which is kind of my favorite time of the Christian year. It's actually the beginning of our calendar. It's not the end like it is in the secular world. So.
And the liturgical colors are gorgeous.
They are. Everything's beautiful. What
Are
do
you
always
I was
say?
going to say, because for those of you, the liturgical colors are either a blue or a purple. And it's like a whole thing out there in the clergy world. Which color do you go with?
Yes.
I've always been at churches that do purple,
me
but
too.
I love blue.
Yeah, I like the blue, too.
Because I have a beautiful blue stole with the different Advent candles. Preachers we all get real excited about our stoles. Kim actually collects stoles.
I used to have a wall of stoles
When
in
we
my
when we
office.
worked together, she had a wall of stoles,
Yeah.
and I'd like to go look at them. And
Yeah, it's a clergy nerd thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we are loving the blue.
yes,
Here at Zionsville for Advent. But we began our Advent series, which is up close and in person, right?
Yes.
Is that right? Up close and in person. I wanted to say up close and
Personal,
personal.
right, yeah.
But which God is too. But I like that instead of using the theological word incarnation.
Yeah.
Just make it plain. Just say what it is.
say what it is.
Yeah, God wants to meet us up close and in person. And Pastor Dave started out talking about incarnation and that it's the shared vulnerability that God wants to share with us in all our vulnerabilities, and that to come as a infant, and human infants are so helpless for so long,
Yeah.
unlike the colt, right, which is raising its head and walking and running within hours of
Yeah.
being born. Like, we need the help of those people around us. And so God came as this helpless infant to illustrate for us that God
Someone
is,
had to hold his head
yeah, for a long time.
for a long time.
Yeah, and that God is there to help us hold our heads up forever. And then, do you want to say something?
Well, I was no.
Okay. And well, the next thing that really stuck out for me was authority and vulnerability going together. And it just was like, oh man, if everyone who was in an authoritative position, wherever and whatever that would mean, would also enter it with some vulnerability,
Yeah.
how different the world might be.
Well, and I love Adam Grant. You can Google Adam Grant. He does all kinds of workplace like psychology and that kind of thing. And he has been really hammering this point lately about how if you're leading an organization and always leaning on authority for the way to get people to do what you want them to do, then you're really missing out on something. And I've thought about that even just as parenting. You know, like, I think the parenting model, like my generation grew up with, was that mom and dad were always right. And even if they weren't right, they couldn't let the kids know they weren't right because then they would lose credibility in front of them. And I have found, you know, a number of times, even like raising my own kids, where, you know, I'm struggling with something and I'll say, I'm not really sure what the answer is right now. If you give me some time to think about it. Because I feel like if they're not really sure, if they see that their mom's not 100% sure on something, then it gives us all like license to be vulnerable, to say, I'm not really sure what the right answer is here. I may need to ask somebody else, or you know.
And it's, yeah, and I think it's also an example of and an opportunity to collaborate with them.
Right.
You know, that they can come to you and you can problem solve together, that you don't have all the answers and you might not even need to because they might already like really have the answer. You guys just need to sort of toss it around.
Well, and I think too, if you're a boss, you're running an organization. If I worked for someone who was like, you know, and showed some vulnerability when like we were going through a really difficult time, I would like, that would go a lot further for me.
Yeah, a lot further.
Yeah. Plus, it shows you trust those people around you enough to be able to say, I'm going to let you see this side of me.
Yeah, and people get to use their specific giftedness, right? Like if I have a team because my team has gifts I may not have, or those gifts are stronger for them than they are for me, and they're there to use their own giftedness, and so why would I not welcome that?
Well, and I think when people in an authority show vulnerability too, it creates such an immense amount of trust that, you know, if I'm working for someone and they say they're struggling, I'm like, oh, they trust me to be able. So when you think about it in terms of Jesus, you know, like, especially when you think about what at the time when Jesus was born, I mean, the Israelites, the Jews thought the person who was going to save them was going to come in on a, you know, in a tank. And really just take over and squash all of the people who had been oppressing the Jews and show immense authority. And the fact that it was completely flipped upside down.
Yeah, exactly.
That it was a baby. You know, I think about Herod saying all the babies have to die now.
Right.
I mean, how little vulnerability could he have possibly shown?
Yeah, exactly.
Because the king of the, you know, was
it's total top-down.
Total
authority,
top-down,
total
yeah.
top-down, yeah.
right.
Yeah. Yeah, and to think about, like, that God does come in all this vulnerability, and so we have a license to be exactly who we are with God and be accepted and loved and saved, you know?
Yeah, it is interesting to think about what's it mean to be Christ-like. And in so many times when we say, you know, I want to be the hands and feet of Christ, right? We always think in terms of serving other people.
Yeah.
We don't really think, well, to be Christ-like also means to be incredibly vulnerable.
Yes.
To not always win.
Which is one of the scariest things for humans, I think.
Ugh.
It's like, it's really hard to be vulnerable and say, like, I'm struggling.
Yeah.
I'm struggling, and I need some help. Can you help me?
Well, and that's even, you skip ahead now to the end of Jesus' life, which Dave talked about a little bit too, like, you know, who are you? They kept saying, who are you? And he could have at any minute said, instead he's, I am who you say I am.
Yeah.
You know, like, that's his chance to say, who am I?
Right.
You don't know
Let
who I am.
me tell you who I am. Which,
I'll tell you who I
I can see
am.
myself going there
totally.
in a second. Yeah.
Do you not know who I am?
Right.
Excuse me.
Exactly.
I'm the one you give the best table to.
All the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's another thing that stood out for me was that compounding debt. Like when you think about Jesus came as a helpless infant, and his whole life was about service and giving and making space for. I mean, just think about all that time with the disciples. I mean, it blows my mind because I know I wouldn't have been nearly as grace-filled as
Yeah.
as Jesus was with them, every day, day after day. But he continually is vulnerable and is available and is showing people who he is, and that compounding debt thing. And I just, in my mind, I can see the clicker, like, dollar, 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 dollar.
Oh, this is when Dave was talking about the national debt.
Yeah,
He was saying
yeah.
in his mind he can see the debt just building.
Yeah.
Yes, right.
Yeah, and that it's compounded over generations and generations and generations, and it continues to compound, and that we are, and it's incredible. I'm awestruck that God is willing to take on all of our debt, because God loves us that much.
It's my favorite Anne Lamott quote is how she describes grace. And she says, grace is the glue that puts the broken pieces of our life back together. Mm-hmm. And so when I think about that compounding debt, that it's all paid for with just this little certificate of grace in some ways, like, here you go.
Yeah, and that's it. Here you go. It's just offered to you. Like, you don't have to do anything to earn it. You can't earn it, because it's freely given.
You said something, too, that I thought about, about the disciples, Jesus being with the disciples. And, that was really one of our, besides Moses and Joshua and some other cases in the Old Testament, but this is in the New Testament, this is the first team leading
Yeah.
And I'm sure there was a number of times he wanted to be like, I'm exhausted with you. I need you to go away.
Me too. I think that happened. It just didn't make the book.
Yeah, that's true. When he said, I need to go away and pray,
Yeah,
it was more
exactly.
because I want to, you fools are driving
There
me
was
crazy.
a lot more to that. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
That was just.
Quit asking who's going to sit next to me and just get on board with what we're doing
none
here.
of you right now.
Yeah, none of you get to sit next to me.
Yeah.
I'm taking the car by myself.
Exactly. Don't let me have to come back there.
Don't let me.
Just all the ways that Christ has, made a way for us, and the thing too, speaking of the disciples and waiting and who's going to get to sit next to him, standing firm for a decade. That part of the sermon, I was like, that's a long time.
So
King
King Ahaz had a little bit of patience, I guess.
Maybe. I wonder, though,
I'm
how
sure
much the interaction with the prophet was like. He was like, listen, just do what I'm saying, not, because 10 years is a long time, especially when you feel like your leadership or your authority is at risk, while you wait.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, every morning he's kind of waking up wondering
And so the enemy moves in, and he's like, what, you want me to wait for 10 years? Like, what?
Yeah.
I don't see anything happening. That, is a show of faith also.
I'm good to wait about day and a half.
Sometimes, if I'm real busy.
But, it does make me think about when you think about your life, what are as a 10-year span in your own life that you thought, well, that was basically what I was doing, was waiting. I just didn't.
Yeah.
I wouldn't put it in that.
And when you study human development, it goes in 10-year, after, once you get to your 20s, you look at 10-year blocks of time. And, in your 20s, there are some tasks that you need to get done. In your 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s, there are all these decade of tasks that you're sort of finishing up. So it goes fast while you're in it. But even if you, when you're 20, you think 30 is pretty, that's old. Like, what, 30?
Yes.
Because that is a long time.
I cannot be bothered with a 30-year-old when I'm 20.
Yeah.
I'm at Purdue.
Right.
I'm cute as a button.
Right, exactly. Full of energy.
Full of energy.
Know very little about anything, but you think you know
So
everything.
stressed, though.
Oh my gosh.
From-
When I worked at a college counseling center, I used to want to say, just do
I know.
your homework.
I know.
But yeah.
It
you
is
can't say
funny, though,
that.
at the different stages of life, what you're able to take on. But I would say, like, from 25 to 35, that was a period of my life where I got married, I was having children, we were moving, like waiting to figure out what is this all going to actually look like. And then I remember around 35, I still wasn't 100% sure, but I was a little more settled.
Yeah. And when you get 65, which I'm not yet, you're a lot more settled.
Yeah, well, it's amazing what happens when your kids leave.
Oh, yeah. It's like, woohoo.
Yeah. Come back and visit.
Yeah, those
Call
commercials
first.
where your room gets turned into something
Yeah,
else
right.
from real life. Yeah. Oh, and do not fear.
Okay, I won't.
Yeah, right. If it was that easy, right?
Only
Like
because you said so.
Like 25 to 35, you got all those things happening, and somebody says, Jamalyn, just chill out. Like, don't be afraid of what's going to happen next, because it's going to happen. Just lean into it. Just let it unfold. How many of us can do that?
Well, my heart rate has gone up quite a bit just listening to you say that. Yeah, I think it's interesting now that my kids are getting older. I feel like I have a lot more worry about them, about this next stage of life. Like, where will they go to college? Will they go to college? What will they go to Tracy? I mean, like, what's going to be the next step in their life? For me, at the stage where we are, our next 10 years are getting kids through high school and college. That's a lot different than that 25 to 35, which was getting married and having kids.
Yeah.
I mean, now we're launching.
Yeah, it is a lot different. And the do not fear mantra probably need to be said often.
365 times the Bible says, do not fear. Somehow I graduated with a Master's of Divinity and did not know that until Sunday.
And John knew that.
John did. John
And
knows everything, so that doesn't
I
really
was
count.
Like, it says it 365
I was like,
times.
365? That's how many days of the year we have.
I wonder if that's coincidental.
People should
or
make
not.
a calendar about that. I'm sure they have.
Oh, yeah. And if not, they will now, right?
Now they will. Patent pending. Yeah, so the do not fear, do not fear, do not fear. I always think about how Jesus is very specific about saying the world will give you trouble. And it's not the world. You may have some troubles, you may not. It's the world will.
Yeah.
But I will give you peace.
Yeah.
And so for me, the do not fear, it's not so much a fear, it's just this worry of chaos.
And I think that, worry can lead to fear. They can be all muddled up together. Because when you're worried, you're fearful about something. When you're anxious, you're fearful about something, right?
And fear can be the most paralyzing thing. I mean, there are people that aren't, how did Dave define vulnerability? The risk of,
I'm not exactly sure.
it's on your notes. Please hold it, people. It's right here. Oh, it was mine. It was like a risk of taking a chance or something. And when you think about vulnerability that way, that makes sense.
It is a big risk, right? Because you're kind of putting yourself out there.
Yeah. So if you allow fear to paralyze you, really what you're doing is blocking any opportunity to be vulnerable.
And in relationship, right?
And in relationship.
Yeah, because if you are vulnerable with me, you risk rejection. But if I don't reject and I'm here for you, then, you've gained a deeper relationship.
Well, whenever I think about this, too, I think about the first time you tell, like, a significant other that you have feelings for them. And there's that feeling that goes through your body where you're pretty sure you're going to throw up, but you're not sure, and because that's like your body.
Well, your engagement story was part of that.
Oh, that's right, it was. But I mean, it's like the fearfulness of I'm going to be vulnerable with this other person in a way that I won't be able to walk it back.
Yeah.
You could say, "Oh, I really love you," and they kind of thank you.
Right. That's
Then
not
you're
what
supposed
you
to. What are
wanna
you supposed
hear.
to say? I was just joking, just kidding.
Is that all you have to say?
It's too late. It's
right,
out.
Right. Yeah.
And so fear can stop you from taking that risk of being vulnerable. And then you may not have that other person in your life as a result of yielding to fear.
Yeah, I wish we could err on the side of being vulnerable and being open and maybe helping somebody else to do that, even if your vulnerability is rejected or resisted, that you've shown someone how to be vulnerable and that you don't take it as a personal slight or as some deficit in you because you were vulnerable.
I feel like this vulnerability is something that we talk about now all the time.
I do too.
More so than ever. And I don't know if part of it is after the pandemic, after COVID-19 took over, we all found ourselves in a very, fragile state.
Yep.
That we had to start talking about vulnerability being okay so people knew it was all right.
Yeah, and because I think we've all been traumatized, and we all have more anxiety than we had before, whatever that looks like. If you thought you didn't have any, you had some, but you have more than you had before, right? And that's kind of on top. I mean, we're leading with that, so I think we're talking about it.
Well, the fact that you can't find a therapist anymore that's taking new patients.
Yeah, you're right.
That's very telling.
Yeah, it is.
For sure.
It's great, and it's that people are getting support. And it's difficult that it takes a long time
So if, we just remember do not fear, then everything will be fine.
Well,
prayer
is good.
That's how I do therapy.
Bible reading is good.
I look for the formulaic answer.
Yes.
And then I check that off and I move on with my day.
It's all good. You got to do some practicing.
Yeah.
You might need to,
The do not fear, remembering do not fear, I feel like that arms you for the day.
I do too. And I just am so inspired and awestruck and honored to hear Karen's story.
Oh, Karen.
And,
amazing.
There had to be a lot of fear a lot of days. And she chooses to know and be sure that God is with her in this. And even if she doesn't know reasons or whys, that, God is certainly with her. And she's amazing. Dave's right.
If you haven't had a chance to hear Karen's story, please go to the website and listen to her story. She is an amazing testimony of allowing fear to be that's only natural that you would be fearful, but not having it be the thing that defines you.
Right, because when somebody tells you, "Oh, we're gonna try this thing, and it might work, and it might not work," there's got to be some fear in that. But she's chosen to know that God is with her in all things. Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, definitely go look at that part of the sermon. I suggest you look at all of it, but definitely look at that part. And so I think this kind of brings us to a natural conclusion for today. But before we end, we always have a mug. And today we have these beautiful handmade mugs from Ale Wine Pottery. And they are a gift to us from Ramona. So Ramona, thank you, and a shout out to you. But I wanted us to sort of end with this note from the what do you call a potter?
A potter.
The potter. His name is Robert Alewine, and this note accompanies his pottery. It says, "I graduated from high school in 1972 with a love for art with no particular direction. I made a pot in a college art class, and I was hooked. Doing something at age 19 that no one else around you is doing has its own special charm, and I hit it as hard as I could. Throughout the 70s, I studied with Bob Monroe, Charles Counts, and Louis Snyder. Connie and I married in 1975. In 1983, she and I, with 2 little girls in tow, moved to Gatlinburg, Tennessee to begin a life journey. Our son Mark was born in 1984. This life of trying to make something beautiful from a ball of clay has had its ups and downs with plenty of stress, but the sense of satisfaction in seeing our business work and all the friends we have made over the years has made all of those sleepless winter nights somehow worth it. Now our children have their own children, and I hope that they all will see through our life that if you have a dream, work hard, and trust God, it can be done." And our mugs say, "Thankful and blessed."
So Thanks,
So
Ramona.
thanks, Ramona. Thanks for joining us, everybody. We'll see you next week.